Hello, and a very warm welcome to each of you for joining us today at GWCN's first Environmental Network Research Centres Summit. My name is Rachel Dardis, and I'm the Director of the Environmental Network Research Centre at the Global Waste Cleaning Network. Thank you all for being with us today. Over the past 4 months, our United Nations volunteer researchers have been developing scientifically valid and reliable research to help contribute to the fight for sustainable environment and clean energy. It is my pleasure to share this research with you today, as 11 of our volunteers will be presenting their findings covering areas such as biodiversity, ecological systems, integrated constructed wetlands, overfishing, global reforestation and deforestation, marine pollution, education for sustainable behaviour, and solutions to climate change. Each presenter is live here today, so if you have any questions as we go along, please feel free to ask in the comments section below. Before we begin with the presentations, I would first like to speak about GWCN and our mission. The Global Waste Cleaning Network is a British organisation which provides a vital role in the growing worldwide movement to reduce the impact of environmental pollution on society. Set up in 2020, GWCN's purpose is to support environmental activities, contribute to environmental debates, spread related information, and fundraise for our environment. Our mission is straightforward. We seek to protect, preserve, and improve the environment for the benefit of mankind. We do this through raising awareness of the negative effects of waste on the environment, through the promotion of good waste management practices, and through the establishment of an international network of active environmental and energy organisations and private and public specialist firms. Through this growing network and through each network member, we aim to connect, showcase, educate and contribute and foster environmental research. Working closely with these members, GWCN provides an important function in the role of finding solutions to today's environmental issues. We advocate for feasible and viable answers to the world's top environmental concerns. We fight for manageable, continuous improvement initiatives, and we do this through our Network Research Centre. Our research centre was established under GWCN and set up in order to further our environment and efficient energy research activities. Our research programs add a level of depth to GWCN and it is our mission and our goal to contribute to the advancement of research and waste management, in the conservation and maintenance of healthy oceans, coastlines, lands and atmosphere, and to help reduce adverse health outcomes for people around the globe. Introducing our first researcher, and joining us from India is Ms. Mariam George. Holding a Bachelor of Commerce, Mariam is a senior research analyst at a leading global management consultancy firm. Her vast experience as a generalist researcher spans across 5 years and across many industries and functions. Mariam's research interests include effective management of landfills, animal waste, deforestation, and building positive outcomes for the environment. Today, she'll be speaking about global reforestation and the drivers of success and failure.
Hello. Let's talk a bit about forests, specifically reforestation. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to talk through the drivers of success and failure of reforestation programs. First, I'll set a little bit of context about the world's forests. Then we'll look at deforestation and its causes. For a bit, we'll look at the measures undertaken around the world to combat reforestation. And then we'll get into the main part of our discussion, which are the drivers of success and failure of sustainable reforestation programs. Let's jump into it. The importance of forests cannot be underestimated. Forests cover about 31% of the world's total land area. We depend on forests for our survival. From the air we breathe to the wood we use comes from forests. They provide habitats for animals and livelihoods for humans. Over 2 billion people around the world rely on forests for their daily lives. Forests also offer watershed protection and prevent soil erosion. And one of the more publicized importances of forests is of course that they mitigate climate change. Now, looking at the spread of forests around the world, most of the world's forest cover is concentrated in 5 countries. Russia, Brazil, Canada, the United States, and China together account for about 55% of the world's forest cover. Now, this is split into different types of forests based on the climate of the area in which they're located. Now, stepping into deforestation, despite our dependence, and that's what we spoke about a few minutes ago, we are still allowing these forests to disappear. Deforestation remains a major threat to the world's forests. Looking at the numbers annually and over the last 30 years, just over the last 30 years, deforestation has taken place at an alarming rate. 7.8 million hectares per annum of forest cover was lost in the 10 years after 1990. Now, while that rate has reduced slightly, we still lost 4.7 million hectares per annum since 2010. Now, if you were to take a few minutes just to go over the major causes for deforestation, you can see them in front of you, but I'll just walk through them as well. Agricultural expansion is the single biggest cause of deforestation. Now, with the increase in demand for agricultural products, supply also has risen to meet that demand. And the victim of that is obviously forest, because a lot of land is converted into arable land for crop and livestock farming, largely livestock farming, but there's still a lot of land is being taken away from the world, or a lot of forest cover that's being taken away from the world. Wood extraction. Now, this includes things like logging and wood harvesting that's largely used for domestic and charcoal purposes, but also any other sort of logging purposes or wood purposes that we might have. For instance, the use for making, as consumers, we might use it for furniture, for paper production, etc. Infrastructure expansion. Now, with the increase in population around the world, as well as the increase in urban population around the world, land has to be cleared, or infrastructure has to be created in order to meet the demands of this increased urban population. This might be cities and the supporting services that surround those cities, for instance, suburbs for people to live in, as well as infrastructure in the form of roads that would lead to these cities and lead out of these cities. Of course, we've all realized what a big problem deforestation is, and this is just a few examples of governments and corporations around the world having undertaken multiple measures to combat deforestation. While this list is not mutually exclusive or collectively exhaustive in any way, it aims to provide a few examples of the measures being undertaken around the world to combat deforestation, just for your understanding. Intergovernmental organizations like the UN have set up frameworks like the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in order to reduce deforestation. And under that, they also created the REDD Plus program that incentivizes governments in their efforts against deforestation. At a country level, several governments have enacted legislation to combat deforestation within their jurisdictions. Finally, reforestation programs have also been undertaken worldwide along with governments, private organizations, and individuals alike. A few examples of these are what you'll see on the next page. Now, these efforts have grown quite significantly over the last 30 years, accounting for about 4.8 million hectares per annum in reforestation from 1990 to 2000, and increasing much more to 5.5 million hectares per annum from 2015 to 2020. However, it's not fair for us just to look at annual growth of forest cover. We'll also have to look at sustainable reforestation. Now, the only way that forests can really help people and we can actually reap the benefits of reforestation or the forests that we have around the world is by having sustainable forest or sustainable reforestation programs. Now, the success of these reforestation programs rests on the choice of method, the appropriate incentives that are put into these programs, protections offered by government, as well as broad-based partnerships. Let me explain a little bit. Revegetation methods relate to the process used in reforestation. This may depend on the climate prevalent in the region where these programs are implemented or the resources available to whomever are undertaking it. In order to bolster reforestation, governments and other organizations also have to incentivize people that undertake these programs through subsidies and providing other types of support. Now, forest protection mechanisms are also very important, and they must be put in place in order to protect existing forests, but also those areas that have been reforested. Large groups of people rely on forests for their livelihoods. Reforestation programs should also consider these people so that in their programs and the type of trees that they use in their programs are sustainable enough and are of use to the people that live in that area. In promoting reforestation, different entities will naturally have different aims. For instance, the government may be mandated or may mandate certain authorities to protect certain areas. Commercial organizations, on the other hand, may have the primary incentive of planting trees in order to harvest them at a later part of their business cycle. For reforestation to work, the funding for such programs must be broad-based, bringing together many different organizations of people with all their intents coming together and the ultimate intent being satisfied of saving our forests. So success can only be achieved by the coming together of all of these factors. On the other hand, any efforts in contradiction to the ones I just spoke about can lead to the failure of sustainable reforestation. Let me elaborate. Undertaking a reforestation exercise without adequately understanding the environment in which the trees that are planted are to be grown may lead to adverse effect on the trees as well as the reforestation site itself. The goals of reforestation themselves must be clear and beneficial to all those involved. This relates to the plethora of goals that organizations undertaking these reforestation programs may have. An example of this is the Bond Challenge from Germany that aims to plant 350 million trees by 2030. While at face value, this might seem like a great way or a great push towards reforestation, a closer look at the program will reveal that the type of trees being planted are easily harvested for paper production, and at the end of this program are likely to be cut for this purpose. As such, this program is unlikely to yield sustainable reforestation. It's also important that you value or that we don't undervalue the natural resources because natural forests have complex ecosystems. And especially in the case of the Bond Challenge, planting only one type of tree in a complex ecosystem might end up harming the site of reforestation. The prevalence of monocultural plantations in place of natural forests hampers the success of reforestation programs in the long run. Finally, the lack of diversification of funding sources, like we discussed earlier, will fail. Like we discussed earlier, to succeed, multiple parties with various goals must come together for these programs. Failure to do this limits the success of reforestation programs. That brings us to the end of our discussion. I hope this has helped. Shed some light on what drives reforestation and how we must look at programs in order to see whether they're actually sustainable and will help for reforestation around the world. Thank you for your patience. Have a good day.
Introducing our next presenter and joining us from Ecuador is Miss Daniela Teo Torrell. Daniela has previously worked as a researcher in topwater in Australia. Daniela's research interests focus on marine and terrestrial ecosystem conservation, management practices, and environmental policy implementation. Her previous research has focused on the world's tropical region and examining the challenges these countries face due to social and environmental changes in recent decades, such as population growth, climate change, and globalization. Reporting her findings, Daniela used a holistic perspective in the analysis of socio-ecological systems in order to create awareness and therefore conserve the ecosystem functions and protect livelihoods for achieving sustainable development goals. Recently graduating from Master of Science in Environmental Management at James Cook University, Australia, Daniela will today be speaking about challenges in Latin America and the Caribbean, exploring the effects of overfishing and marine pollution.
Today, I will discuss some of the challenges in Latin America and the Caribbean region regarding overfishing and marine pollution, specifically abandoned, lost, and discarded fishing gear. I will give a brief introduction to Latin America and the Caribbean region, Then, for the first topic, overfishing, I found it necessary to explain why illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, abbreviated as IUU, leads to overfishing. Also, I will discuss the trends of lack fisheries data. For the second topic, abandoned, lost, and discarded fishing gear, I will assess this issue with a driver pressure state impact response framework, assessing each component. Latin America and the Caribbean possess a wide variety of habitats and marine biodiversity. Therefore, the region provides a range of ecosystem services of significant economic and social value. This region is particularly vulnerable because of its rapid human population growth and higher demand for fisheries products. These pressures on the marine ecosystem leads to overfishing and increased ghost fishing. Overfishing. The long-term sustainability of fisheries in the LAC region is threatened. About a third of fisheries are overexploited or depleted. Overfishing occurs when the catch of target species exceeds the capacity for replacement, leading to a decline in catches and possible collapse of stocks. The reduction of stocks leads to an increased fish effort, destructive fishing practices, and bycatch due to low selectivity while fishing for target species. Overfishing also leads to fishing down the food web by depleting large predator populations and catching lower trophy groups of minor commercial importance or undersized individuals before reaching maturity. Globally, marine fish catch has increased 8 million tons from 2010 to 2018. Therefore, fisheries are being masked by improved technology, geographic expansion of fishing grounds, um, and increased landings of minor importance known as trash fish. IUU fishing is a global problem of great concern in marine fisheries where small-scale and industrial fisheries coexist. IUU fish landings add more than 26 million tons a year to the global catch. Therefore, IUU fishing is linked to overfishing and threatens the security of fisheries resources for the future. In the last decade, the international instruments and their application in combating IUU fishing have prevented some IUU fishing vessels access and illegal caught fish into the markets. Still, IUU fishing undermines the effort to manage fisheries and the problem remains. Illegal fishing means fishing within a declared exclusive economic zone without the state's permission or violating any national law and international obligation on the high seas. National and foreign vessels participating in illegal fishing activities target locations where regulation and enforcement are weak. These illegal activities generate significant economic losses for the LAC countries. Unreported fishing. In many fisheries, the data of catches are commonly unreported to the national authority or the RFMOs. Especially small-scale fisheries catches are sometimes not available in official records, or they have just recently been collected. Unreported fishing usually happens because there is a lack of organization and control. Another reason is due to the geographic, in which landing sites are located in remote locations. Unregulated fishing occurs when the practices are carried out by unregistered vessels or vessels of nations that are not part of the RFMOs. Unregulated fishing commonly occurs in area or fish stocks where there are not applicable laws or there are inconsistencies with conservation and management measures. For small-scale fisheries, regulations remain under study and sometimes ignored. Many small-scale vessels tend to be unregistered and their sizes and dimensions unregulated, as there are no clear definitions when distinguishing small-scale fisheries from large-scale fisheries. Complete data is needed to identify the total allowable catch, which is one of the most common fisheries tools. Fisheries fail to report catches, leading to poor quantitative estimates for the whole fisheries. IUU fishing leads to overfishing and affects the possibility of assessing and managing marine resources. The official national data does not include catches from IUU fishing. As this activity is secretive and clandestine, the data is inaccurate and not included in the fisheries assessment. Nevertheless, it is possible to analyze trends in the LAC region through available data and identifying overfishing signs. The database from FishStat software of the FAO shows that the trends of marine fish catch in terms of live weight from 1950 to 2018 in LAC countries. In the graph, wild marine fisheries catch increased from approximately 500,000 tons in 1950 to 13 million tons in 2018. The different variations cannot be attributed only to overfishing. It can be related to other human or natural threats that affect the fisheries, such as fish population natural fluctuations or seasonal patterns. For example, the upwelling Humboldt Current sustained a large fish population, showing sharp rises in 1970, 1994, and 2000. On the other hand, El Niño Southern Oscillation is responsible for major declines due to sea temperature changes. When analyzing the data, it shows that the top fisheries are Peru, Chile, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, and Ecuador. Therefore, South America is the main contributor in the region, largely explaining landing changes in the LAC region. On the other hand, the Caribbean region has the smallest landings. Still, countries like Dominican Republic, Bahamas, Grenada, and Trinidad and Tobago receive meaningful foreign exchange from their valuable catches. In the Central America subregion, they highly depend on the coastal fisheries on the Pacific and the Caribbean, and Mexico contributes 77% of marine catches. The understanding of past and present resource exploitation is fundamental to ensure the sustainable use of fisheries. However, the future trends lack information affecting fisheries management effectiveness. To fill a knowledge gap, it is essential a literature review. In the table, it is possible to see some examples of overfishing in different fishing grounds in the region linked to IUU fishing. This shows that overfishing remains the greatest threat to marine resources. Although these examples are context-specific, they provide useful insights for the region. It shows that there is a high political will in the region to act against IUU fishing. Nevertheless, these actions did not prevent fish stocks decline because enforcement is inadequate or not existing. Likewise, corruption in LAC countries is high and political interest influence decisions more than what is recommended from a technical perspective. There is a great need to improve data collection and determine the real status of fisheries. Still, the absence of scientific research due to limited financial support remains a problem. The assessment of stocks is key for policy formulation and effective management, and the enforcement of these policies will indicate how effective the measures are at stopping overfishing. Topic 2. I will give a rapid assessment of abandoned, lost, and discarded fishing gear in the LAC region. There is a significant concern for increasing ecological and socioeconomic issues associated with abandoned, lost, and discarded fishing gear. Although fishing gear makes up less than 10% of marine debris, it can substantially impact the ecosystem. Fisheries switch from fishing gears made from natural materials to synthetic materials that are not biodegradable and last longer in the marine environment. The overall increase in fishing capacity in shallow to deep sea grounds has further escalated the loss of fishing gear. To analyze this issue, it was used the driver pressure state impact response. It is a framework adapted to determine and assess the link between human pressures and state changes in marine environment, and to address social environmental problems. The driver exerts pressures on the environment. Consequently, the state of the environment changes and leads to impacts. Therefore, this analysis could identify responses that feedback on the driving forces, the state, and impacts. An overriding driver leading to the accumulation of fish gear is the high demand for marine resources. Over 2.3 million people are directly or indirectly involved in fishing activities. Consequently, the LAC region is highly dependent on fishing as a source of livelihood. Pressures. Lack of effective management results in a considerable increase in fishing capacity and fishing effort. Fishing gears are most commonly lost due to adverse weather conditions like storms, cyclones, or strong currents. Other causes include gear in poor conditions and operational problems like entanglement with other gear, vessels, or even the bottom topography. Therefore, the leading cause of gear loss is accidental, and fisheries usually attempt to retrieve the gear as it represents a high cost. Nevertheless, gears are sometimes intentionally discarded or abandoned, for example, during illegal fishing activities to avoid getting caught, or where there is not incentive to retrieve them as it can be expensive or inaccessible. This section indicates the current state of the environment. Lake region is one of the richest in the world in the marine biodiversity. However, both biological and anthropogenic factors influence the state of the marine ecosystem. Overexploitation, climate change, and marine debris results in habitat degradation and marine biodiversity loss. In this case, the accumulation of ghost gear over many years represents a significant risk. Impacts. Ghost gear represents a significant threat. Entangled or dead marine animals function as bait, attracting even more marine species during the lifespan of the fishing gear. Marine species that are caught or entangled in ghost gear can die due to starvation, suffocation, predation, disease, or exhaustion. It affects both target and non-target species, causing pain and suffering to the animal. Additionally, fishing gear is responsible for directly affecting the health of marine habitats. It produces physical damage and forms artificial habitats that facilitate invasive species transfer. In the figure, it is possible to see the key findings for each component. The last component I'm going to talk about is response, which gives recommendation to driver, pressure, state, and impacts. Ghost fishing is considered a high international priority. Thus, several national and international instruments are in action to fight this issue. However, the lack of monitoring and control of the measurements leads to ineffective management. The prevention of fishing gear reaching the ocean includes simple actions such as creating awareness about impacts, promoting repair or replacement if the gear is damaged, also training fishers to handle gear and marking the gear to keep track of it. The project Morago in Chile is a great example of adequate reception of fishing gears. It consists of collecting gear in storage facilities and recycling them into new products. Mitigation. Inevitable loss of the gear can be mitigated through reporting of the accident and recovery of lost fishing gears, if safe to do so. Another possible solution is to implement traps fitted with escape panels for non-targeted species to escape, or include biodegradable fishing gear. Corrective measures consist of removing ghost gear during beach cleanups. Also, the use of current onboard technology by fishing vessels can reduce initial losses and increase the recovery of the gear that has been declared lost. Mexico and Panama have participated in this type of projects thanks to Global Ghost Gear Initiative and its different partners. As we can see, ghost fishing arises from increasing number of active vessels, over allocation of fishing licenses, and IUU fishing pressures. However, improved fish management measures have been proposed, as well as preventive, mitigation, and curative measures to reduce the impact caused by the ghost gear. To conclude this presentation, fisheries in the lake region are an important economic activity and income source for fisheries and coastal communities. The diverse marine ecosystem in the region allows high and valuable marine catch. Nevertheless, unsustainable exploitation where overfishing and ghost fishing occurs could threaten a wide variety of habitats and marine biodiversity in the region, affecting the small and large-scale fisheries in the long term. Thank you.
Our next presenter is joining us from the UK and is an environmental scientist and scholar student, having recently completed a Master of Science in Environmental Science at the University of East Anglia. With international experience in water resource management and environmental management systems, her research interests focus on environmental impact assessment, sustainable technologies, the circular economy, and global environmental policy. Today, Ms. Sumaira Shah will be presenting her research on assessing the sewage effluent nutrient removal efficiency of integrated constructed wetlands.
Hello, everyone. I'm Soumya, and today I will be presenting on the role of integrated constructed wetlands, ICWs, in sewage effluent nutrient removal efficiency. Global eutrophication of water resources has catalyzed the use of sustainable tertiary wastewater treatment technology. Furthermore, specific EU directives and adopted UK laws have been introduced to mitigate against and further prevent deterioration of aquatic ecosystems caused by excess nutrient load dissemination, particularly nitrates and phosphates, through treated sewage release in sensitive water bodies. Integrated constructed wetlands, ICWs, emerge as a potential solution to efficiently mitigate freshwater eutrophication caused by sewage effluent. An upcoming nutrient management technology using environmental engineering, constructed wetland systems are viewed as an alternative to expensive chemical-induced tertiary treatment or secondary effluent treatment. Split into two types, both versions share a number of physical, chemical, and biological processes parallel to natural wetlands. Constructed wetlands or engineered wetlands are more commonly implemented. Despite having lower phosphate removal rates, they classify into two traditional types: free surface flow wetland with 4 subtypes, having increased macrophyte clusters and a bare back water surface, and subsurface flow wetland with 3 subtypes, having no clear water surface. Water flow direction extensively determines proficiency, that is, vertical flow constructed wetlands have higher oxygen diffusion rates, leading to increased oxygen concentrations through enhanced aeration. This leads to increased nitrification capability, but reduced denitrification. On the other hand, horizontal flow constructed wetlands makes extensive use of macrophytes with an optimal depth range of 30 to 80 centimeters and a 1 to 3% slope for gravitational forces to work on the effluent, acquiring an overall smaller land area, however, have comparatively larger maintenance costs. Integrated constructed wetlands are economically efficient with reduced maintenance costs and energy requirements and are eco-friendly. They're less engineered than their counterparts. Research has additionally determined some factors affecting overall nutrient removal efficiencies in ICWs, such as operational conditions, example plant density, soil substrate, design, microbial activity, and weather conditions, with tropical weather suiting ICW functionality more as it promotes year-round growth and consequent microbial activity and local ecology. ICWs consist of a chain of interconnected cells that are unlined with their wetland bed, constructed using in situ soil as compared to artificial liners. Treatment processes are expected to occur from the start of the first cell to the end of the last cell, appropriate for nitrates, phosphates, suspended solids, biological oxygen demand, heavy metals, and pathogens. Most ICWs are typically free surface flow wetlands having shallow water depths of 20 to 40 centimeters, surrounded by emergent vegetation, native aquatic plants abetting periphyton communities such as reeds and rhizomes, which are used as biofilters to absorb excess nutrients from the influent, as well as reducing water velocities to allow sedimentation of particulate matter. The plant variety attracts wildlife diversity, such as insects, birds, and mammals. However, they require a larger area of land and pose a larger risk of pathogen exposure to humans, hence being a preferred tertiary treatment facility for advanced effluent treatment compared to agriculturally treated wastewater. Contrastingly, subsurface flow constructed wetlands require smaller land areas. They use macrophytes, having high nutrient absorption capabilities, planted in soil substrates such as sand or gravel, to enhance microbial activity in treating pollutants and drawing out organic compounds and inorganic compounds from the treated wastewater discharge. Absorption and filtration processes allow for a higher efficiency of carbon and nitrates removal due to higher oxygen concentrations present. With a recurring lack of information on the efficiency of treating commercial wastewater through ICWs needing to be addressed, and a particular lack of research on the efficiency of ICWs in treating nutrients and organic pollutants between seasons, especially during winter, real-life personal research was undertaken at the River Ingle ICW in North Norfolk, United Kingdom, from February 2019 to March 2020. The newly established River Ingle ICW is situated adjacent to the Anglian Wastewater Treatment Plant by Inglesthorpe Town, 1.08 hectares in size. It consists of 4 intellect shallow cells with a uniform 0.2 meter depth, with water flow between each cell being through 2 to 3 underground pipe sections. Cell 1 is the entry point for the treated effluent from the wastewater treatment plant, and cell 4 being the exit point discharging the water into River Ingle. Primary research in the River Ingle ICW was carried out as a desktop study. Fieldwork was carried out monthly from February 2019 to March 2020, where water samples from the 10 sampling points, as shown by the yellow arrows in the image, were collected during each visit and analyzed for nitrates, phosphates, and dissolved organic carbon levels in the laboratory. Furthermore, water flow into and out of each cell and river flow across 3 segments in the River Inger were also measured. Seasonal variations showed significant decreases in nitrate concentrations across the River Ingle ICW and the riverine results during spring and summer. This can be attributed to robust nitrification and denitrification cycles running in parallel across the water column, aided by a balance in nutrient input, a longer hydraulic residence time, and a lower hydraulic loading rate. However, the lowest temporal decrease of 0.94% was observed in winter across the wetland, complementing the 157.87% riverine increase. This clearly demonstrates wetland inefficiency during winter attributed to reduced microbial activity and plant assimilation, brought about by reduced oxygen availability and dormant vegetation, with macrophyte surface coverage being less than 50% across each wetland cell, compared to more than 70% coverage during the spring and summer months. This trend is followed in phosphate concentrations with an overall 8.33% increase in wetland concentrations during winter, supported by the highest increase across cells of 40.10%, attributed to abiotic leaching from detritus because of the increased litter decomposition rates and reduced phosphate storage in vegetation due to shorter hydraulic residence time and an increased hydraulic loading rate. Phosphate storage in emergent microphytes is short-term, with most phosphate being translocated to the roots and rhizosphere. With reduced temperatures and increased dead organic matter, microbial uptake may tend to be rapid in velocity, but the actual amount of phosphate storage is low. As for the dissolved organic carbon results, there was an 18.35% increase during the winter season, attributing to the ICW to be a dissolved organic carbon source, further evident by the astronomical increase of 235.87% in riverine concentrations across winter. Bacterial decomposition of dead, decaying plant matter converts stored particulate organic carbon into dissolved organic carbon, which initiated the release of humic material in the water column. Furthermore, the plant rhizosphere released dissolved organic carbon in the water. Hence, dissolved organic carbon leaching from the plant community is dominant in the River Ingle ICW. Nitrates were found to have the highest inlet nutrient load, followed by dissolved organic carbon and phosphates during the sampling period. The ICW clearly showed significant efficiency nutrient load removal rates for phosphates and nitrates. The summary statistics on the slide indicate the hydraulic residence time of 13.7 days. Research indicated that longer hydraulic residence time in spring and summer seasons increased nutrient removal rates when aided by lower water volumes. However, for winter, excess rainfall was found to reduce hydraulic residence time and increase the water volume, leading to lower nutrient removal rates. ICWs have gained recognition from their initial introduction in the 1990s. The most common application of ICWs globally is that for wastewater treatment, termed as a sustainable treatment method and an eco-san practice. The ever-growing need for wastewater treatment and management in urban and peri-urban areas has led to many successful applications of the ICW technology globally. Despite having cohesive results for nutrient removal efficiencies, there is an identified research gap for commercial wastewater treatment using ICWs, with the effects of seasonal dynamics remaining to be poorly understood, despite being a crucial factor affecting microbial activity rate and local ecology growth rate. Contrastingly, infrequent real-world applications of ICWs and lack of progress monitoring prevents research on its scalability, which is practically assessed by continuous monitoring of its treatment efficiency. Thank you for your time and attention.
Our next speaker is Ms. Luce van der Graaf, joining us from Lithuania. Luce is a researcher and project manager at PPMI Group in Lithuania, and her research topics focus on education, youth, inclusion, and sustainability, covering regions in Europe and Central Asia. Luce has obtained an MA in Global Governance and Cultural Diplomacy from the University of Siena. She has previously worked on projects relating to sustainable government goals commissioned by the EU, UNICEF, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization, and the United Nations Development Programme. She also recently completed a research project on climate change and slow migration in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Sudan. Luce's future research interests include investigating how education can support sustainable development, specifically in relation to climate change. Today, she'll be presenting her work on education for sustainable behaviour.
Thank you so much for inviting me to speak at this conference. I want to talk to you today about an extremely important topic, namely, how can we create a population on Earth that is mindful of its environment and positively contributes to nature and sustainability of our lives on this planet? For most of humanity's existence on Earth, we've always lived quite in balance with our surroundings. We impacted nature, but nature always could either restore or find a new balance. Animals were killed only for our immediate survival. Trees were cut so we could build our houses, create fire, and make space for agriculture to feed our communities. But over the past century, new global developments, inventions, population growth, they've all caused increasing damage to our ecosystem and our planet. This has led to irreversible changes such as animals going extinct, and changing climates, as demonstrated, for example, by the current chart on my slide. We often and easily point to, for example, airplanes and polluting industry as the guilty parties of this change. It is easy to forget that actually the planes, the cars, all the plastic tools and polluting companies, they would not exist if there was no demand from them from our side as consumers. From generation to generation, we've built up a culture of consumption, preferably cheap, of course, to which these polluters are responding. So if we didn't want to travel or have cheap products, there would be significantly less pollution. Therefore, we can design new technologies and as pollution laws, and we can enforce the Paris Climate Agreement and have these top-level discussions, but they do not address the core essence of the problem, which is our behavior and our habits that are ingrained in the way we live in our culture. So behavioral analysis to support sustainable behavior has emerged in, let's say, the past decades and focuses exactly on this topic of how do we change behavior. So the theory behind behavioral analysis and behavioral change is to identify a behavioral practice that you want to change, design an intervention that addresses specifically this kind of behavior, and then evaluate the consequences and the impact that this has made. This can be done, for example, through antecedent interventions that take place before the behavior starts, such as information campaigns and education, and consequent interventions that create a reward or penalty if the behavior takes place. For example, financial rewards for recycling or penalties for bad waste management. While such interventions may adapt behavior to a certain extent, it does not always provide sufficient leverage to change our whole culture of consumption and our related habits. So what I liked was an article written by Nicholas McGuire, who explains that a large part of our behavior is, of course, formed by these cognitive awarenesses, like knowledge that our behavior is unsustainable. But a large part also comes from automatic processes or our subconscious thoughts. And I think that you will all agree that when we think about our behavior and our habits, like, for example, nail biting, is not something you think about doing. It's something you just do because you've always done it and you're used to doing this. And therefore, Nicholas, he argues that any kind of behavioral intervention, especially linked to sustainability, should not only focus on this cognitive awareness and spreading of knowledge, but also address our subconscious and our overall identity, which should be focused more on sustainability. So what does this mean for education? My vision to create a sustainable human population, it comes from the idea to completely revise how we teach about sustainability in education programs. Because like we always say, the youth is the future, our children are the future. Well, I actually think so. And I will explain in a moment why. Building on the work of Nicholas McGuire, I reviewed many education programs and their evaluations to determine what kind of approaches to sustainable education can actually create both this cognitive and subconscious awareness towards sustainable behavior. So firstly, we do already see the tendency of including environmental education in schools, but it's mostly focused around science, earth studies and biology, rather than included throughout all subjects and included in school in general. And one of the findings from many evaluations is that environmental education to create a sustainable behavior should make sure that children are constantly immersed in a pro-sustainability environment. This means that also courses such as history, economics, languages should include elements of sustainability. And most importantly, school themselves should create a sustainable environment that promotes recycling and engages actively in pro-sustainable behavior. For example, waste cleaning activities for children to take part in. And this links also very closely to the second point on my slide, namely that to create a behavior and habit or culture, you need to have continued long-term exposure. So just to have 1 year of sustainable practices is not enough for children to realize that sustainability is part of their life. And this is then again why the whole school approach is so important, because from the first grade to the last grade, all throughout their school career, children need to be immersed in this pro-sustainable environment. And not only the school and the teachers, but everybody in the environment of children should be engaged in sustainability. So during the development stage of a child, the parents, of course, play an important role. So parents need to make sure that the home environment is also pro-sustainable, but also the peers, so children collaborating with each other for sustainability. And then, of course, the teachers and other people in the community who can play a leading role in creating a sustainable mindset. And if we do this for, let's say, 18 years, we have grown a population, a generation that is so immersed in sustainability and sustainable behavior that when they go out into the world, they are both cognitively and subconsciously aware of how to behave in a sustainable way. So to conclude my presentation, I think you all agree that current unsustainable behavior has been formed over decades. It's not something that happened overnight, but for each new intervention and each new machine, we contributed a little bit more to unsustainable behavior, which has been passed down then through families, societies, and education systems. And even though we as older generation, to say so, we are aware that what we are doing is unsustainable, but our current behavior is so ingrained in our identity that it's very difficult for us to completely go blank and start a new habit. So this is more difficult, and it requires therefore also more effort from us to be more sustainable and to consider the choices we make in our consumption. And therefore, I think that if we want to really radically change humanity's approach to sustainability, we should not try to change the older generations, but rather do what we can, but actually focus on training the next generation to design a new culture of sustainability and environmental recovery. Because again, the children are our future. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here today.
Our next presenter is Ms. Risha Bhushan, who is joining us from India and will be speaking with us today on sustainable energy solutions to tackle climate change, a case study for India and the world. Risha is a technology and strategy professional with demonstrated industry expertise in carbon technology, with over 3 years of experience in the energy industry, working on topics such as oil and gas processing and emission reduction. Risha's research areas focus on solving the problem of climate change while increasing her learning curve of green energy alternatives. She aims to provide technical solutions and their net impact on improving climate health. Risha currently holds a degree in chemical engineering from Indian Institute of Technology in Kharagpur, India. She is a published academic author with papers on microfluids on droplet movement without external energy with the use of chemical gradient. She has also developed a prototype for hybrid energy combining solar and vibration energy. Risha is also a strong ambassador for gender and women empowerment and education for all. Please join me in welcoming Risha.
Good day, everyone. I hope you're comfortably seated in whichever part of the world you are in, because it won't be long when we, or at best our children, will not have what we had. The nature retrieve that we love to spend our vacations in, the nature from which we take far too many and give back way too less. Climate crisis is impacting one and all in today's world. In this presentation, we'll discuss two critical concepts behind the ongoing climate crisis, that is global warming and energy demand. So what is global warming? For the uninitiated, Earth has heated up more than 1 degree Celsius in the past century. So what? It is estimated that a 2 degree Celsius rise can trigger irreversible global warming process, which will be beyond mankind to control. With the current temperature increase, there are shifts in biodiversities that has been reported, changes in weather patterns that concerns food security, all of which we'll discuss in the coming slides. But if this temperature increase is going to be a problem, what is the root cause behind it? The answer is not far off. The increase in the global greenhouse gas emissions since the industrial era traps heat and thus impacting the temperature increase. Now, what are these GHG emissions? As can be seen in the graph, carbon dioxide and methane are the two gases with largest heating imbalance. So if we want to cut down our global warming, we should directly aim to lower our carbon dioxide and methane emissions. Okay, but when do we emit these GHGs? Almost while doing everything. A video call on Zoom meeting emits about 1,000 grams of CO2. A typical car emits about 400 grams per mile of traveling. In fact, production of 1 kg beef causes about 13,300 grams of CO2. If we look at this graph of GHGs by sector, we can clearly see the major pie is with energy demand of the world, which includes industries, transportation, residential, and commercial requirements. So can we do anything about it? We sure can. We'll discuss about it soon. But let's first look at what will happen if we don't. This is a pictorial representation by NASA that I really like. It demonstrates how the heating of the world has changed visually. What is to be noted is that the impact of global warming that we see today is probably dated back to the actions of decades ago. So if data is to be followed, things will only get worse. For more capitalist friends on call, the net damage due to climate change is estimated to be $210 billion. Slowly, this number will keep building, and today, a low carbon economy is better financially too. So what are these impacts of global warming? We have all heard about the California fires, Amazon burning, Siberia wildfires. Today, there's a 30% higher risk of fires in these forests due to global warming. In 2011, Kenya saw a drought that left 3.4 million people in food insecurity. Did they deserve it? After all, Kenya only accounts for 0.1% of global GHG emissions. Arctic is warming up twice the rate of the global average. Thawing of permafrost is specifically dangerous here. As we have seen in the first slide, these large methane emissions can aggravate the heating effect in the region in loop. Now, talking about the famous fallacy that if global warming is true, why do we have colder winters? Because that's how nature works. The polar vortex, due to warm Arctic, for example, brings cold air to the US. In India, due to response of Himalayas and Indian Ocean to the warmer weather pattern, cold waves and floods have become a regular phenomena in the last 5 years. There are several accounts of floods that are seen in Southeast Asia, which led to 3,365 casualties. India and several African regions faced storm attacks due to change in Indian Ocean dipole movement that led to food insecurity in the region. My question to you today is, if this is not enough, what will be? Paris Agreement has brought forward several of these impacts and researches in the front row. If there is nothing else from this PPT that you take away, I would like you to understand this slide, which explains the difference between 1.5 degrees Celsius rise versus a 2 degrees Celsius rise in temperature. This 5 degrees Celsius change would actually mean 2 to 3 times harsher impact on our land, oceans, biodiversity, population, and weather patterns. The initiatives and commitment of organizations and nations towards carbon neutrality are actively evaluated commensurate the rise of 1.5 degrees Celsius now, all thanks to Paris Agreement. Which brings me to the next point, that Paris Agreement indeed brought an institutional change, elevating the clause and arguments in support of the climate initiatives. Recent pandemic energy scenarios have demonstrated that clean energy is more resilient for the uncertain markets and has drawn several financing schemes. If all is good, do we really see a change already? No, because all is not good. The latest predictions in December 2020 show a 3 degrees Celsius rise in temperature with current policies by the end of the century, which we all know is halfway through the extinction level of global warming. For the current presentation, we'll focus on India's scenario for a zoomed-in view. India is the third largest emitter of GHG, but when you look at the per capita figures, it is half of that of the world and about 1/9 of USA or Canada. So once you look at the details, you will find the devil, like always. And here, the conversation is more about the huge population. India's huge population faces an additional problem of energy access with 300 million still lacking access to the grid. Historic emissions of India has remained low as many other developing nations. However, it stands 7th on climate risk index. India has thus made a commitment against progress and has pledged 33 to 35% reduction in emissions per GDP. India has demonstrated compliance to its targets with its National Electricity Plan. When we look at the total power sector, 24% is renewable currently. A majority of 62% is thermal, coal, gas, diesel based. The declining cost of solar panel had revolutionized the market. Solar and wind are the two major players in the current renewable space. But is this enough? Like most answers on this forum, the answer is no. The energy demand will likely double by 2040. So how does the future look like as per current policies? India has set itself a target of 175 gigawatt by 2022, and it will likely overachieve its targets. It is scouting for new investments of $500 to $700 billion by 2030. There will still be a huge gap in the potential to be fulfilled. Future is not easy, and we need to be ready for it. Finally, on a positive note, India is also home to the 4th largest installed renewable power with huge potential in expansion as shown in previous slides. Government policies and organizations need to materialize these opportunities, tackling several non-technical risks on its way before it's too late. Last but not the least, let's start doing our bits and try to reduce our personal carbon footprint every day. Thank you and have a nice day. Bye.
Our next speaker joining us from Kenya is Ms. Joan Manoga. Joan currently holds a degree in the management of agroecosystems and the environment. As a researcher in a laboratory water analysis, Joan has a background in dealing with wastewater and water treatment technologies. Today, she'll be discussing the ripple effect in waste management.
The ripple effect. What do I mean? The ripple effect occurs when an initial disturbance to a system propagates outward to disturb an increasingly larger portion of the system, just like how ripples expanding across water when an object is dropped. So, how do we integrate this? This won't be done by anyone else or the government. It will be done by you and me through working together. I believe in maximization first of what we have before seeking new alternatives. No need of extra input or fundings, just utilizing what is currently there. Therefore, who will integrate this? Who exactly is you and me? The youth. Out of 7 billion people in the world, 1.8 billion are youths, which is around 28% of the total population. The youth have potential that need to be fully tapped into. But before we get into that, using youth as an example of waste management, who exactly is a youth? The United Nations classify a youth as one of age 15 to 24 years. But for the purpose of this presentation, anyone from 4 years to 30 years apply. Just look at the waste around you, in your immediate environment. It's waste from daily activities and lifestyles, mostly by the mobile and versatile group of the population, which is the youth. From where we eat, what we read, how we read, our daily lifestyle and activities impact our waste in more ways than we may think. We have many problems to tackle. Climate change, achieving the SDGs, our hair or what we wear can really cause a stressful day. But with individual actions on waste, this can go a long way. So much has been done, so much is being done. We have a foundation. All we need are the implementers to stop new waste as we deal with the current waste that is already there. Advantages of the youth are they are not bound by beliefs and traditions, but by facts and science. They have time with few dependencies, hence can focus better. Through education, awareness on environmental relations can reach many youths at the same time with no extra cost. Being the most energetic group, much can be achieved in productivity. We just need each and every youth, poor or rich, to be aware. Then we shall have our ripple effect.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dr. Alan Bomhanji, the Editor-in-Chief of the Environmental Network Journal, ENJ. This is a product of the publishing arm of the Environmental Network Research Center at the Global Waste Cleaning Network. It is with profound gratitude and honor to introduce to you the Environmental Network Journal, ENJ. This is a biannual, fully peer-reviewed, open-access journal whose mission is to help researchers communicate with the global audience and interact with expert scientists from across the environmental science community. Our academic editors take an objective and constructive approach to peer review each and every submission. Submissions to this journal are assessed based on their scientific soundness and validity and not on their subjective assessments of importance. The Environmental Network Journal covers a wide array of environmental science subjects. Some of these include environmental management and pollution control, conservation biology and sustainable agriculture, climate change, adaptation and mitigation, environmental economics, environmental analysis and monitoring, aquatic and terrestrial biology and ecology. Built on the philosophy of openness, we are passionate about working with the global research community to promote open and impactful research. I would therefore like to interest you all in our next series of publications. Let your work communicate with the wide environmental research community by submitting your research manuscripts to our website at gwcnweb.org. I would want to conclude by wishing you the best in the rest of the summit presentations. Goodbye and thank you.
I would like to now introduce our next speaker from India, Ms. Cecilia Cole. Cecilia is an assistant professor at Bharati Vidyapeeth's College of Engineering. Holding a master's degree in engineering with years of teaching experience behind her and a published research background in computer science engineering, Cecilia has had the opportunity to teach and interact with more than 1,500 undergraduate students. She previously worked on computer engineering-based projects on topics such as image processing, network security, computer networks, data science, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. Today, Cecilia will be examining the significant issue of deforestation. Please also remember, you can ask questions in the comments section below throughout each presentation.
Hi, my topic for presentation today is deforestation. First, let me tell you how did I come upon to choose this topic. In 2009, I watched a movie, The Avatar. I'm sure you all must have seen that movie. It was very popular. In that, it was shown that the Earth has already been destroyed by the humans, and now they are trying to colonize an indigenous populated planet named Pandora. We have seen those indigenous people were so close to their environment and nature. For them, trees were their homes and lifelines. Similarly, on Earth, trees are the same. They are our lifeline. We are actually clearing the trees to make way for our modern lives. Trees are the living and breathing example that our nature is alive. So let me start with my presentation today. What is exactly deforestation? Deforestation is the permanent removal of trees to make room for something besides the forests. This can include clearing the land for agriculture or grazing, or using timber for fuel, construction, or manufacturing. According to the World Wildlife Fund, forests cover more than 30% of Earth's land surface, and this percentage is reducing by the day. Forests are cleared for many activities, human activities, of course. They are cleared for our homes, for our factories, for our schools, for our industries, mainly the industries, hospitals, and etc. And often for the greed of the humans who want more land. So what happens when there is large-scale deforestation? It causes loss of habitat of organisms. There are so many organisms besides humans who depend on the forest directly as their homes. Increased greenhouse gases. Yes, the entire, I will say, epidemic of global warming, which is increasing day by day, which is heating up our planet, is a direct cause of deforestation. Imbalance of water in the atmosphere. Yes, in many areas which are basically getting drier and drier due to deforestation, which were earlier used to be very wet when there was a lot of forest covers. Soil erosion and flooding. Floods are very common these days, and we are hearing every day in news some or other place besides coastal regions or even other places are getting flooded from the rivers because there is no tree cover to hold the soil. Destruction of homeland of the indigenous population. Yes, there are many tribes and villages which directly depend upon the forest for their livelihood. They are directly affected when we clear out a forest. As you can see, the devastating effects of deforestation, where entire vast spaces of lands are converted from green to brown and looks like the life has been sucked out of them. One of the most dangerous and unsettling effect of deforestation is the loss of animal and plant species due to their habitat loss. 70% of the land animals and plant species live in forest. We make a very small percentage who do not live in forest. Not only does deforestation threaten species known to us, but also those unknown. The rainforest trees that provide shelter for some species also provide the canopy that regulates the temperature. Yes, it prevents the heat from reaching the ground. Deforestation results in more drastic temperature change from day to night because now the ground of the forest are exposed to the sun, much like a desert, which can prove fatal for many inhabitants. Yes, they die when they are used to live in a particular temperature, and when that forest is removed, they are exposed to the elements of the nature. Lack of trees also allows a greater amount of greenhouse gases to be released into the atmosphere. Healthy forests absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We all know that green trees give out oxygen, our life oxygen, and absorbs carbon dioxide. Acting as a valuable carbon sink, deforested areas lose that ability and release more carbon. Deforestation is in fact one of the most dominant causes of global warming. It is actually the main cause which is causing global warming. The balance of water in the atmosphere is highly affected by deforestation. The trees also help control the level of water in the atmosphere by helping to regulate the water cycle. In deforested areas, there is less water in the air to be returned to the soil. This thus causes drier soil and the inability to grow crops. Yes, deforested areas which are actually cleared out for agriculture has to depend upon artificial sources of water rather than natural, because that area gets lesser and lesser rain as the tree cover reduces. Deforestation also causes soil erosion and flooding, as I was telling earlier. The effects of deforestation include soil erosion and coastal flooding. Because trees help the land to retain water and the topsoil, it holds onto the topsoil, as you can see in this picture. Without forests, the soil erodes and washes away, causing farmers to move on and perpetuate the cycle. They keep on moving inside and inside the forest for more cultivable land. The barren land which is left behind in the wake of these unsustainable agricultural practices is then more susceptible to flooding, especially in the coastal region. In fact, we all keep hearing that there are many countries, many island countries, which will be submerged in the next 30 to 50 years. Destruction of the homeland of the indigenous population. As large amount of forests are cleared away, allowing exposed earth to wither and die, and the habitats of innumerable species to be destroyed, the indigenous communities who live there depend on the forest to sustain the way of life are also under threat. The loss of forest has an immediate and direct effect on their lifestyle and livelihood that we in the industrialized parts of the world, despite our own heavy dependency on what the rainforests provide, will never know. We will never know that what it feels like for your home to be taken away in front of your eyes by chainsaws. The level of immediacy is exponentially greater for these indigenous population. We have to stand beside them so that they don't lose their livelihoods and homes. I would like to quote some examples, some very recent examples, which are direct causes of deforestation. Since I'm from India, I would like to highlight some floods, some big floods, which recently happened in my country. Bihar floods. As per a report released on July 30, 2019, the death toll caused by flooding events throughout the month has risen to 130. Inundation affected a total of 88.46 lakh people. Yes, that greater an amount from a flood. And in 1,269 panchayats or villages across 13 districts were affected. Kerala floods. As of August 19th, 2019, the floods had killed 121 people and injured 40 in several flood-related incidents. A further 21 were reported missing. Over 26,000 people were taken to refugee camps as floods destroyed close to 1,800 houses. Maharashtra floods. August 2019. According to the report, rain and flood-related incidents had killed 35 people across the state. As many as 761 villages were affected and more than 4 lakh people were displaced. Very recently, in fact, just a few days back, in the state of Uttarakhand in India, a huge glacial burst happened. As you can see from this very sad and devastating picture, how the water with that force of sludge is coming down the mountains and destroying villages and constructions. Glacial burst in Uttarakhand, Chamoli, leads to flash floods on 7th February 2021. Yes, that recent. Retreating glaciers, like several in the Himalayas, usually result in formation of lakes at their tips, called proglacial lakes, often bound only by sediments and boulders. If boundaries of these lakes are breached, it can lead to large amount of water rushing down to nearby streams and rivers, gathering momentum on the way by picking up sediments, rocks, and other materials, and resulting in flooding downstream and causes huge destruction. So far, more than 200 people are suspected to have lost their lives, and there are more than 100 people who are affected who are still stuck at many places. Often due to deforestation, the soil gets loosened and when mixed with collected water, slides down as sludge flood. So let's talk about some solutions, what we can do to prevent deforestation. Deforestation and degradation are very complex problems. They cannot be solved within a day or two. We all must join our hands together to prevent it. The power of the marketplace. Basically, deforestation can be prevented by the power of the marketplace. If the demand reduces, the supply will also get affected. So as humans, if we stop, depending entirely our lives on industrialization, maybe that can get affected. Maybe the companies, the corporates will move to other sources of businesses rather than cutting down forests. Standing with the indigenous population. They need our direct support and aid to prevent their homes from getting lost from deforestation and their livelihood altogether. Promoting sustainable choices. We, the people, have the power to change our habits. We can depend our lives on more sustainable choices, like depending less on the natural fuels, by planting more trees, by not harming the nature as we do, by reducing the unsustainable constructions and reducing our population mainly. Changing the politics. Every year we see so many summits happening, environment summits happening, but it results in no palpable change. So what we can do, like we can put pressure or force our governments to take acute steps to prevent our environment of our country or the nature reserves of our country. 5 organizations launched partnership to protect intact forests. These are the solutions to deforestation. On 25th of September 2019, in parallel to the UN Secretary General Climate Action Summit, 5 organizations, Global Wildlife Conservation, Rainforest Foundation Norway, UN Development Program, Wildlife Conservation Society, World Wildlife Resources, launched the Forest for Life Partnership. It's a campaign in recognition of forest as nature-based solution to climate change and biodiversity protection. These programs, these campaigns are very important to sustain our existing forests. What else we can do? No action can ever be imagined if we do not involve our future generations, our kids. Promoting forestation by mandatory tree plantation drives at school level. Tree planting is a great way to increase student interest in the local environment and achieve academic goals. Each school, tree planting provides educators with the opportunity to inspire school administrators, faculty, and students to effect positive change at their school and in turn, their communities. And this can actually prevent deforestation or replace the forests which have already been destroyed. Thank you for joining. Let this presentation inspire you to be more proactive towards saving our environment, to better our lives and future generations. Let us all resolute to maintain a green earth for a green future. These are my references. Thank you.
Our next presenter joins us from Hungary and will be speaking on marine debris pollution, with specific focus on the dangers of microplastics. Her focus on this important issue stems from her research interests on solid marine pollution, renewable energy, and overfishing. Currently a master's student of environmental engineering at the University of Pannonia in Hungary, Ms. Susan Negez has a great passion for a healthy environment and a strong willingness to be an active and helpful part of society.
Hello everyone. So in this presentation I'm going to talk about a serious environmental issue, which is marine debris pollution, and I will be focusing on microplastics pollution and how it is threatening our planet. So in this presentation I will go through different parts. I will start with a small introduction, then I will show the countries that contribute the most to marine debris pollution, and then I will focus on microplastic and its impact on marine wildlife and human. Then I will show some measures that are taken by some African countries and European countries to reduce and prevent marine debris pollution. And I will show how we as an individual can also contribute to the prevention of this pollution. And I will finish my presentation with a conclusion. So nowadays, the world is facing incredibly serious natural resource and environmental challenges, such as climate change, deforestation, melting ice caps, air and water pollution, etc. So all of these challenges are exacerbated by the increasing population, therefore the rising of demand. In fact, over the next 40 years, the demand for fresh water will rise by 50%, the demand for food will rise by 70%, and the demand for energy will nearly double. So the excessive demand leads to the most today challenging issue, which is the focus of my presentation today, marine debris pollution. So the major focus will also be on the plastic debris, as it is among the most abundant types of marine debris on a global scale. So the reason why plastic become a major focus worldwide is that it represents 80% of the total marine debris. In fact, 4 out of 5 top ocean polluters are made of plastic. In fact, the top plastic polluters that we can find in water bodies are cigarette butts, plastic bottles and their caps, food wrappers, and plastic bags. So over 300 million tons of plastic are produced annually. And unfortunately, 94% of the annual production goes to waste. And the global ocean receives 5 to 13 million tons of plastic each year, which is the equivalent of a garbage truck loads worth every minute. So what are the countries that contribute the most to marine debris pollution? As this map shows, China produces the biggest quantity of plastic waste, with 3.53 million metric tons of it ending up in the ocean. And the United States come right behind China with 38 million of plastic waste generation and an annual waterborne plastic garbage of 0.11 million metric tons. So before knowing the danger of microplastic, it is important to know what is it microplastic. In fact, they are a tiny fragment of plastic debris that are less than 5 millimeters in diameter, and based on their origin, microplastics can be classified into two categories. We can find the primary microplastics and the secondary microplastics. In fact, the primary microplastics are the plastics that are produced in a micro-size range that can be used in medicines, textile, and care products as one of their components. They can be the raw material used for fabrication of plastic products. They are known as resin pellets. The secondary microplastic, they are the result of a mechanical, chemical, and biological degradation of macroplastic. Now let's see how plastic debris and microplastics can impact marine wildlife and humans. In fact, around 650 different species have been impacted by marine debris, and 92% of which is plastic. In fact, every year, 100 million marine animals die from plastic waste alone. In fact, fish, seabirds, sea turtles, and marine mammals can become entangled in or ingest plastic debris, causing suffocation, starvation, and drowning of those animals. So microplastic can also impact humans, as they can be ingested by fish, birds, and even by macroscopic organisms. So it can reach the dish of the human. In fact, a human consumes an estimation of 39,000 to 52,000 microplastic particles per year from food and beverage alone. This can cause a variety of several problems for humans, such as nervous system damage, kidney issues, and reproductive or hormonal issues. So marine litter is an issue that requires a global response from policymakers, practitioners, and the wider public. In fact, by 2050, it is estimated that plastics are going to outnumber fish. So therefore, it is up to us, humans who participate in this catastrophe, to take action before it will be too late to curb the damage by then. Like other continents, Africa is also contributing to the current global challenge of marine litter pollution, particularly plastic pollution. In fact, in 2010, about 4.8 million tons of mismanaged plastic waste were produced in Africa, and this may reach 11.5 million tons in 2025. So in order to prevent this pollution, some measures were taken by some African countries. In fact, out of 54 states, 34 have either passed the law banning plastics and implemented it, or have passed the law with the intention of implementation. In Nigeria, recycle points and the Lagos Waste Management Authority are cooperating to collect recyclable waste items directly from consumers. Also in Nairobi, Kenya, Takataka Solution manage residential and commercial waste by asking clients to segregate waste into organic and inorganic. As a result of their efficient operation, Takataka collects 10 tons of waste per day and recycles up to 95% of it. Also, the European Union countries are also trying to prevent this pollution by adopting some directive regarding the waste. We have the Waste Framework Directive, which aims to increase the overall municipal waste recycling targets. We have also the Packaging Waste Directive, which aims to increase the recycling targets for specific streams, including plastic packaging. We also have the Landfill Directive, which aims toward a residual-only vision for landfill. Also, the policy of bans and taxes on plastic bags are also used in the European Union state members. In fact, in Italy, Belgium, and Ireland, they have taxed the plastic bags since before 2008. On Ireland, the plastic bag use dropped by 94% within weeks of the 2002 ban. In Switzerland, Germany, and Holland, plastic bags come with fees. Also, the normal individual can contribute to the protection of our planet from plastic pollution by following different instructions. First, they can avoid the use of plastic. This can be done, for example, by using non-plastic bags and containers for food packing, purchase second-hand instead of buying new clothes, step away from the microbeads, say no to plastic cutlery, etc. So when outside, if there is no bins around, you can take your trash with you, reuse products whenever possible, and use items made from recycled material. So as a conclusion, we can say that a successful solution to a marine litter problem require coordinated action amongst a wide range of public and private actors across sectors and from the local to the global level. And thank you so much for your attention.
Our next speaker is joining us from Spain and is Dr. Claudia Lopez Morago Quesamir. Dr. Quesamir is a biologist and a biological anthropologist with more than 5 years of experience in coordination of science divulgation activities. She is currently a postgraduate student in the University of Cadiz in Spain, studying development cooperation and humanitarian action. Her interests include environmental education, climate change, and disaster displacement. She'll be speaking today on the conservation of island biodiversity, focusing on the threats and challenges for endangered species.
In the first place, I would like to thank to Global Waste Cleaning Network for the opportunity to share this research with all of you. Island biodiversity requires specific attention for several reasons. Island plants and vertebrates, because they have evolved in isolation, are characterized by extremely high rates of endemism. Insular biota is also very prone to extinction. Around 80% of past extinction and a third of threatened terrestrial species are found on islands. Although climate change may impact island biota in many different ways, sea level rise and climate shifts will be of major importance due to their direct association with the availability of suitable habitat for terrestrial organisms. Recent studies show that islands situated at low latitudes were most vulnerable to threats from climate change. In this presentation, I would like to show the example of two insular emblematic species threatened by climate change and human activity. Ever since the Tapanuli orangutan was described in 2017, it was ranked as a critically endangered by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, with only 800 individuals. The new species is only found in the forest of the Batang Toru ecosystem in the province of North Sumatra, Indonesia, and is the most isolated primate in the world. Pongo tapanuliensis is highly vulnerable to extinction because its remaining is small, fragmented, and poorly protected. Also, despite the effort to protect some of the world's most biodiversity-rich territories, Sumatra still has one of the highest levels of deforestation, consequence of road construction, agricultural expansion, illegal logging, and mining. To ensure the survival of these species, I advanced 3 urgent recommendations. All remaining Pongo tapanuliensis habitat should be immediately protected. Nowadays, just the 85% of their habitat is under some form of protection status. Clearly, lands around the fragments must be restored as faunal corridors. and the proposed hydroelectric dam project should be cancelled. Baobab, one of the most remarkable trees in Africa, have great ecological and economic value. Madagascar is home to 6 of the 8 species of baobabs. 3 Malagasy species are classed by IUCN as near threatened, and 3 are critically endangered. Despite their resistance, baobabs are one of the most affected species by climate change, and their ecological extinction is possible for 3 main reasons. They are sensitive to temperature and thermal fluctuation. Baobabs are very long-lived species, so their regeneration rate is very slow. The recovery of these species could take hundreds of years. Finally, as we just saw, baobabs are vulnerable to climate change, but they are also suffering other types of threats such as logging, fire, and overexploitation. 3 possible recommendations for baobab conservation. Suitable habitat for baobab species should be protected with great urgency. Human activities such as logging should be limited to reduce the rate of habitat contraction in these areas. To ensure the long-term viability of these species, in addition to in situ conservation, ex situ conservation methods such as germ plants and gene banks may be considered. Before finishing this presentation, I would like to highlight that for conservation to be successful in a long-term basis, it's important to gain the support and involvement of local people. And this is why community-based conservation projects are crucial. Thank you very much for your attention.
Joining us now from Nigeria, I would like to welcome Mr. Nosaba Oka as our next presenter. Mr. Oka is a PhD researcher with the School of Natural and Social Sciences at the University of Gloucester, UK. His career has equipped him with essential intellectual skills for examining public policy on social implications of clean energy development, strengthening ecological systems and climate change mitigation. Mr. Oka published articles in peer-reviewed journals, synthesizes empirically researched arguments for policy transformation and sound project design in sub-Saharan Africa. Over the past 10 years, Mr. Oka continues to provide sustainable development, sensitive energy learning and developmental services and proposals in addition to scholarly engagements. Today, he will be speaking with us on ecological systems disturbance, discussing the implications of green growth prescriptions on rural social systems.
Good day, everybody. My name is Nosayaba Oka. I'm presenting from Lagos, Nigeria. The topic for today is ecological system disturbance and the implications of green growth prescriptions on rural social systems. The first question I would want to ask, or the fundamental questions that this presentation wants to clarify is, does the green growth proposition cater for sociological system gaps around rural populations? Of course, we've seen read a lot about the benefits of green growth prescriptions, high caters for greenhouse gases emissions, controls or moderate climate change. And today, we want to go further, or probably I would say deeper, to look at how this also affects many rural populations from where a lot of activities that is also needed to support green growth occurs. Now, first of all, let's look at sustainable development goals that cover sociological systems, rural populations, and of course climate change. Goal 1 says no poverty. Goal 2 says no hunger. Goal 3 says
good, pardon me, Go 3 says good health and well-being. Goal 4 says reduce inequalities. Goal 11 says sustainable cities and communities. Goal 12 says responsible consumption and production. Goal 14 says life below water. Goal 15 says life on land. And goal 16 says peace, justice, and strong institutions. Now, these are sustainable development goals that relate to sociological system, either in urban centers or in rural communities. Now, the Food Agriculture Organizations in 2028 reported a World Bank estimate of 736 million people living below the poverty line of $1.19 around the world. And also the Global Multidimensional Poverty Index of 2018 says 1.4 billion people are exposed to different types of vulnerabilities around the world. And that means about 1.4 billion poor people around the world are exposed to different types of vulnerabilities. And of course, one researcher, Castaneda et al., said in 2018 reported that about 80% of the global poor live around rural communities and whose income depends mostly on agriculture and other forms of wages from agricultural related activities. Of course, we want to agree with me that the issue of extreme poverty is really complex. In different contexts, many government contests the global estimate because it doesn't project their effort too well. But of course, we know that poverty can be identified through different forms. One of them is malnutrition, employment opportunities, access to basic infrastructures, I mean to say, inequalities, exclusion, and poor living conditions. So what that means is that when you see all this, you can actually identify those that are living, those that are poor, those that are living in poor conditions. And of course, you also want to talk about those that have poor access to healthcare facilities. Now, what are the identifiable green growth gaps? Lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, graphite, and aluminium, and of course, many other raw materials needed for producing rechargeable lithium batteries used for renewable energy storage are raw materials that are sourced from ecological systems. Now, it's been reported by UN in 2020 that 65% of the global cobalt supply is produced in Democratic Republic of Congo. Out of these 65%, 20% of them is sourced from artisanal mining, where the engagement of child labor and human rights abuses have been recorded. And of course, when we're also talking about artisanal mining, it also means that it also shows that mostly they don't observe institutionalized mining practice, which means the manner and ways of mining can affect the local ecology where they source the raw materials. Also in Chile's South, the Atacama, lithium and other mining activities consume about 65% of the region's water. These communities around the region, the Andean region of Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina, estimated to hold more than 50% of global supply of lithium beneath its salt flat, are also contending with miners for access to communal ecological resources, cultural facilities, and all what have we. And this brings us to a very, very key questions that we also need to ask. How sustainable is the sourcing of lithium and other raw materials for the production of rechargeable lithium batteries for energy storage? This is a minor gap, but the question you want to ask is, okay, and so what? What this means is that many of these communities who already have poverty prevalent around rural communities are likely to be worse off from the distortionary effect of ecological system disturbance, especially with respect to mining for raw materials for producing batteries for energy storage. Of course, we already know that these communities are exposed to effects of climate change, land degradation, and industrial pollution from mining, maybe fossil fuel mining activities, and the natural depletion of resource stock, among the major disturbances to ecological system around rural settlement. But if we are proposing that green growth is supposed to improve social ecological systems well-being, then there's a gap which makes the effects or the benefits of green growth proposition to be disproportional. And that's one of the questions that this research want to throw open to the to research scholars, how we can fill this gap, how this can be corrected. Of course, it's also well known that a lot of effort has been put in to ensure that most of those batteries are recycled so that they can be sent back into the system. But the question is, at what pace, at what scale are these going on? If I want to look at from the pragmatic perspective, given either an imaginary or the realistic ecological system impact from lithium and other raw materials mining from energy storage, then some green growth outcomes are likely to be disproportionately impact rural geographies differently. Also, just opposing this gap from Amartya Sen's concept of well-being based on people's potentialities and capabilities to do and become, as reported by Robbins in 2017, the multifunctional and multi-contextual framework of green growth may have be unknowingly laced with subjectivities with impact or that impacts context differently. Of course, I don't think that you have electric cars presently running in countries like Congo, or even if, let's go deeper, the rural communities. But if you want to look at, if you want to also look at how some contexts are benefited from raw materials from Congo, from Bolivia, from Chile, from Argentina, you want to agree with me that the impact are disproportional. When we talk about clean air, when we talk about the effect of climate change or climate calamities, when we talk about how you're able to plant trees for to moderate or sequester greenhouse gases emission. Now, these are issues that we all need to look into. Although the scale of mining activities, bearing that in mind, the scale of mining activities impact of socio-ecological system may be proportionate to geographical dynamics such as the population size where this mining takes place, human settlement proximity to mining sites, existing ecological framework and capability of enforcement or regulatory enforcement institution. Yes, these are dynamics that may determine the level of impact, but the reality is it affects or the certain kinds of exposure to these communities. And that's one of the things that we want we want to draw from this presentation. And to forestall green growth from becoming another paradox, cheaper but faster alternative that standardize and democratize sustainable impact based on people's potentialities, capabilities, improvement, need to catalyze economic transformation and poverty reduction across contexts. Now, if we're going to look at how this generation, the present generation, can benefit from the effect of green growth as well as the future generation, then we have to find a way to standardize and democratize sustainable impact across contexts so that people's potentialities and capability improvement can actually take place across contexts. Also, green growth prescription should also be embedded with solutions and policies that directly aimed at bypassing non-sustainable natural resource dependence that can stifle the free flow of ecological services and benefit to overcome poverty cycles around rural communities. Now, we don't have the details of how much poverty can reduce if mining activities for lithium batteries is controlled or moderated in such a way that the impact on socio-ecological system is not too much. But we want to agree that even 1 million people moved out of poverty around the world, moved out of poverty line as a result of this, the world will be a better place. Now, consideration for sustainable cities. The argument that green growth prescription is prerequisite for an ecological system may be subjective. That's what this paper or this presentation wants to clarify. Maybe subjective and doubtful, with claims mostly from incomplete information. Okay, we need to also identify mechanisms to independently and interdependently scrutinize key ecological indicators, economic growth prospect, and social condition changes in response to green growth proposition, irrespective of context. Green growth systems' contribution to social well-being improvement should never be expected to be linear. Of course, because of socio-economic and socio-political dynamics across contexts. What this means is that we shouldn't expect green growth prescriptions or proposition to be linear. But you see, the fact that people are impacted is a reality and is their reality. The question is, how do we take them down? How do we moderate this impact? How do we reduce this impact? How do we make the world a better place for this group of people? Now, we also want to tracking the relationship between ecological system conditions, social well-being, and economic progress through the lenses of green growth prospect alone may seem too ambitious. Okay, we've heard a lot of the benefits of green growth. We've heard all kinds of claims on the benefit of green growth across the world. But you see, from the pragmatist perspective, people's experience and ideas determines what benefit that green growth bring to them. And so, one of the things this paper or this presentation we would like to propose is more research that actually captures people's experience based on green growth proposition. Nevertheless, the sustainable development goals is very, very clear on what sustainable development wants to achieve across the world. Most importantly, equity, no poverty, hallelujah. Equity, no poverty, and of course, the last part of it is until every segment across contexts enjoy the benefit and tangibility without stifling improvement in people's potentiality and capabilities, then the green growth proposition might become another paradox, which will need to find deeper and more extensive solutions for. This is just a simple presentation. I'm sure many of us will have questions. You want clarifications. You want maybe recommendation, but you can send inquiries to Global Waste Cleaning Network for further inquiries. and we'll be able to respond to you. But by and large, what we are proposing is that the concept of green growth needs to be subjected to further research to understand how it affects human beings across scale and across level. Thank you for listening, and I want to thank the organizers of this conference for giving me the opportunity to present my slides today. Thank you very much.
Mr. Marcel Nurbulatov is our final presenter and will be discussing lower biodiversity in Central Asia. Marcel recently completed his bachelor degree in international relations, focusing on foreign policy and preventing regional conflicts at the Kyrgyz National University. His research interests includes renewable energy, air pollution, and lowered biodiversity in Central Asia. Marcel has previously worked in the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, the United Nations Development Programme, and the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency, where he raised awareness about environmental and human rights protection in the mining sector in Mongolia. Please join me in welcoming our final presenter, Mr. Marcel Nurbulatov.
Hello, my name is Nurbulatov Marcel, and now I'm going to present about lowered biodiversity in Central Asia. So to begin with, biodiversity serves as the basis for creating the necessary conditions for the functioning of ecosystems and the provision of environmental services necessary for human survival and sustainable development of civilization. Decrease in biodiversity can lead to destabilization of biota, loss of integrity of the biosphere, and its ability to maintain the most important environmental qualities for life on Earth. Here we can see the picture named key ecosystem communities. There are a lot of number of ecosystem communities in Central Asia, such as Central Asian Northern Desert, Central Asian Southern Desert, Central Asian riparian woodlands, rock and ice, and etc. The spacious diversity of flora and fauna of the countries of Central Asia and their abundance are directly dependent on the state of the environment. And Central Asia is a largely arid region consisting mainly of steppes, deserts, and mountains, so with some more fertile parts like the Fergana Valley, which is shared by Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. Central Asia was formerly under Soviet rule, as we know, and this year marks the 30th anniversary of the independence of all 5 countries. Talking about rural population of Central Asia, Tajikistan has the highest number of people who live outside the cities. It's about 73% according to this table. And over the past 25 years, the anthropogenic load in the Amudarya basin has increased significantly, and large-scale development of urban planning, industry, and agriculture, a limited contribution to solving environmental problems, led to an increase in the pollution of natural waters of the entire basin. According to this picture, and Central Asia is amazingly diverse in its habitats, from inland seas and deserts below sea level to fertile valleys to snow-covered mountains that are among the tallest in the world. Its wide biodiversity reflects this variety of habitats, and agricultural development has drastically altered the region's landscape since the second half of the 20th century, and many habitats have been destroyed. The dissolution of Soviet Union in 1999 led to dramatic changes in social, political, and economic life of the region that have had further enormous consequences for biodiversity conservation. Central Asia possesses unique importance for Earth's biodiversity. It's in the heart of Eurasian landmass. It contains a very wide variety of landscapes and climates, and the ecosystems and different species it harbors are immensely varied, many of them of global as well as regional importance. talking about regional relative importance of impacts on ecosystems and trends. There are a lot of number of impacts on ecosystems, such as habitat change, pollution, overuse of resources, climate change, and invasive species. For example, climate change has an increasing impact on various ecosystems, including evergreen forest, wild fruit and nut forest, desert forest, tundra, and riparian forest. Loss of biodiversity in the region continues mainly due to habitat destruction, overexploitation of agricultural resources, environmental pollution, including mining and energy development, and unregulated introduction of alien plants and animals. Talking about natural areas of Central Asia, currently there are 34 state reserves and 10 state national parks with a total area of 6.3 million hectares on the territory of the countries of Central Asia. In general, about 2.8% of the territory of these countries is classified as specially protected natural areas with various protection regimes. In accordance with international recommendations, the share of intact natural landscapes required to ensure sustainable conservation of biodiversity and support vital ecological processes should be about 10% of the entire territory of the country. According to these two tables, Turkmenistan has 0.8 hectares per person, which is the highest number forest cover per person, and according to table of arable land, Kazakhstan has 1.4 hectares per person, which is the highest number as well in Central Asia. And it's very important to have the vision and goals, but one of the most serious reasons for the decline in species diversity in Central Asia is the fragmentation of habitats and reduction in the total area of species habitat, as well as the biosynological consequences of anthropogenic impacts. However, the role of most animal species in the functioning of ecosystems and maintaining their stable existence is not fully understood. As a result of human activity, some species have disappeared completely, while others are under threat of extinction. For example, 221 species of animals and 287 higher plants are included in the Red Book of Kazakhstan. Kyrgyzstan, on whose territory about 1% of the world's biodiversity lives, respectively 68 and 65 of animals and plants were introduced. Tajikistan's Red Book included 162 and 222 species. Uzbekistan has 301 and 161 species. Turkmenistan Red Book included 152 species of invertebrates and vertebrates and 109 species of plants. Biodiversity is influenced by various global factors such as climate change, as I said before, but this factor acts relatively slowly and imperceptibly. Various natural disasters such as fires and others, human activities have the greatest impact on biodiversity. And it's very important to have the very clear vision and goals for the conservation of biological diversity. For example, there is a need to raise the level of understanding by society and government bodies of the importance of supporting civil initiatives in the field of biodiversity conservation. The problem of information support for civil society, state and non-state structures in the field of environmental protection and sustainable development has become increasingly urgent in recent years. There is also a need to raise public awareness of the importance of biodiversity conservation and the role of ecosystem services in maintaining the country's food security, including using traditional knowledge and technologies based on the use of genetic resources. For conclusion, let me remind you one brilliant quote said by Thomas Eisner, who was a German-American ecologist. He once said that biodiversity is the greatest treasure we have, and its diminishment is to be prevented at all cost. So thank you for your kind attention.
To conclude on today's conference, I'd first like to thank all of our highly dedicated UN research team for their presentations and for providing us with significant research contributions to help in our sustainable environmental and efficient energy goals. It is our hope that all the research topics you heard here today will have an impact on advancing research across these environmental areas and will help GWCN grow in our mission of refining a sustainable, healthy environment across all regions of the globe. We hope this will result in healthy oceans, coastlines, lands, and an atmosphere free from negative health outcomes for both people and nature. I would also like to thank everyone who joined us today and to thank those of you who commented and asked questions throughout. It has been my pleasure to host today and to represent our first environmental research conference under GWCN. Once again, I'm the Director of Research and my name is Rachel Dardis. It has been my pleasure, and on behalf of GWCN, we thank you.